The snow fell thick and heavy across the Ardennes forest in Belgium. It was December 1944, and the German army had just launched a massive surprise attack that would later be called the Battle of the Bulge. Captain Klaus Weber pulled his coat tighter as he watched his men dig artillery positions into the frozen ground. They had moved under complete darkness, leaving no traces behind them. Weber commanded 4 105mm howitzer guns. These cannons could fire shells over 10 miles away and destroy enemy positions with deadly force. His battery had relocated 3 times in the past 2 weeks, and each time something impossible happened. But tonight, Weber believed they were finally safe. The position was perfect. Dense pine trees surrounded them on all sides. They had covered their tracks in the snow. No lights were allowed. Radio silence was strictly enforced. The guns were positioned in natural dips in the terrain, making them invisible from the air. Weber had followed every rule in the German artillery handbook. His second-in-command, Lieutenant Hans Kruger, approached through the darkness. The young officer had survived 2 previous positions that were mysteriously destroyed. His face looked tired and worried. "The guns are ready, sir," Kruger reported. "All camouflage is in place." Weber nodded. "Good. We fire at dawn. 3 rounds per gun. Then we move again immediately." "Sir, may I speak freely?" Kruger asked. Weber knew what was coming. "Go ahead. How do they keep finding us?" "We follow every protocol. No fires, no lights, no radio. We move in complete darkness. Yet within hours, American shells rain down on our exact position. It makes no sense." Weber had no answer. He had commanded artillery batteries since 1941, fighting across Russia and France. He understood warfare. But this was different. The Americans seemed to see through fog, forest, and darkness itself. "Some men are saying the Americans have ghost spotters," Kruger continued quietly. "Spirits that can see everything." "That is superstition," Weber said firmly. But in his heart, he wondered, how else could it be explained? Across the forest, 12 miles behind American lines, Major Frank Harrison sat in a heated tent studying maps and numbers. At 32 years old, Harrison had been a mathematics professor before the war. Now he used those same skills to destroy German artillery batteries with frightening precision. The tent was filled with strange equipment. Tall poles with microphones stood outside in geometric patterns across the hills. Inside, specialists monitored oscilloscopes that showed sound waves as glowing lines on small screens. Charts and graphs covered every surface. "Sir, German artillery fired 3 rounds from Sector 7, reported Corporal Chun, a young Chinese-American from California. "We have 6 clean recordings." Harrison moved to the plotting table. 6 different microphone stations had detected the German guns firing. Each microphone recorded the exact moment the sound reached it. Harrison and his team used these tiny time differences to calculate exactly where the enemy guns were hidden. The mathematics were complex but beautiful. Sound traveled at 343 meters per second through cold winter air. If one microphone heard the blast 0.5 seconds before another, the calculation revealed distance and direction. With 6 microphones forming a geometric pattern, the intersection point showed the enemy position with incredible accuracy. "Range to target, 14,200 meters, Harrison said, marking the map with a red circle. "Bearing 287 degrees. Call it in to Battery B." Within 90 seconds, American artillery officers received the coordinates. Within 2 minutes, shells were loaded and guns adjusted. Within 3 minutes of the German battery firing, American counterbattery fire was on the way. Back in the German position, Weber's men had just finished firing their planned 3 rounds at American infantry positions 5 miles away. The crews were already preparing to displace and move to a new location when Kruger heard it first, the distinctive whistle of incoming artillery shells. "Incoming!" Kruger screamed. The first American shell exploded directly between 2 of Weber's howitzers. The blast was enormous, throwing men and equipment into the air. Shrapnel tore through the gun crews like invisible knives. Before anyone could react, more shells arrived. Weber dove into a foxhole as his command post exploded behind him. The carefully camouflaged position became an inferno of fire and flying metal. His 4 guns, positioned exactly where the shells were falling, were systematically destroyed one by one. The American artillery fire was not random. Each shell landed with purpose, walking across the battery position like deadly footsteps. In less than 60 seconds, Weber's entire battery was eliminated. When the shelling stopped, Weber emerged from his foxhole into a scene of devastation. 2 guns were completely destroyed, reduced to twisted metal. The other 2 were damaged beyond repair. 7 of his men were dead. 12 more were wounded. The survivors looked at him with fear in their eyes. Kruger appeared, blood running from a cut on his forehead. "Sir, we must evacuate the wounded." Weber could only nod. This was the 3rd battery he had lost in 2 weeks. Each time, the pattern was the same. They would set up in a hidden position. They would fire a few rounds. Then, impossibly fast, American artillery would destroy them with perfect accuracy. AS medics worked on the wounded. Weber walked among the ruins. How did they do it? No American planes had flown over. The forest was too thick for ground observers to see through. They had maintained perfect radio silence. Yet somehow, the Americans knew exactly where they were. Lieutenant Kruger joined him, staring at the destroyed guns. "Permission to speak, sir?" "Granted. I want to find out how they are doing this," Kruger said. His voice was calm but determined. "There must be a logical explanation. No one can see through forests and darkness. There must be a method, a system." Weber looked at the young officer. In Kruger's eyes, he saw something beyond fear or defeat. He saw scientific curiosity. "What do you propose?" "Let me observe. Let me study their positions through binoculars. Let me talk to survivors from other batteries. There must be a pattern we are missing." Weber considered this. The war was going badly for Germany. The Americans and British were pushing from the west. The Russians were crushing them from the east. But understanding this mystery might save German lives. "Very well," Weber said. "You have my permission. But be careful, Lieutenant." Kruger saluted and disappeared into the snowy forest. Weber watched him go, wondering if the young officer would find answers or simply become another casualty of this invisible war. 12 miles away, Major Harrison marked another successful mission in his logbook. Battery destroyed. Estimated 4 guns eliminated. His sound-ranging team had performed perfectly. The system worked exactly as the scientists promised it would, but Harrison felt no joy. He was a mathematician killing men he would never see. The numbers were clean and precise. The reality was bloody and terrible. He closed his logbook and tried not to think about the German soldiers on the receiving end of his calculations. Outside, the microphones continued their silent watch, waiting to hear the next enemy gunfire. The invisible war continued, fought with mathematics and sound waves instead of bullets and bombs. And somewhere in the snowy forest, Lieutenant Hans Kruger began his quest to understand the impossible. 2 years earlier, in the hot Oklahoma summer of 1942, a different kind of battle was being fought. At Fort Sill, the United States Army Artillery School, scientists and soldiers gathered around strange equipment that looked nothing like weapons of war. Dr. Lawrence Bragg, a British physicist who had won the Nobel Prize years before, stood before a group of American artillery officers. He was explaining something that sounded like magic to the military men. "Gentlemen, sound is simply vibration traveling through air," Bragg said, pointing to a large diagram. "These vibrations travel at a known speed. In cold air, approximately 343 meters per second. By measuring when these vibrations reach different locations, we can calculate exactly where they originated." The American officers looked skeptical. They were trained in traditional artillery methods. You observed where enemy shells landed. You sent scouts to find enemy guns. You relied on luck and experience. This talk of physics and mathematics seemed like fantasy that a young captain named Frank Harrison sat in the front row, fascinated. Unlike the other officers, Harrison had taught mathematics at university before joining the Army. He understood what Bragg was proposing. "Dr. Bragg, you are saying we can locate enemy artillery by sound alone?" Harrison asked. "Precisely," Bragg replied. "The British used crude versions of this in the First World War. But now, with better equipment and understanding, we can achieve remarkable accuracy." The principle was elegant in its simplicity. When a large gun fired, it created an enormous sound blast. This sound wave spread out in all directions at the speed of sound. By placing microphones at known distances apart, scientists could measure the exact moment the sound reached each microphone. If microphone A heard the blast at 12 hours seconds, and microphone B heard it at 12 hours, 0.1 seconds. That meant the sound took 0.1 seconds longer to reach microphone B. Using the speed of sound, this translated to a distance difference of 34.3 meters. With 6 or more microphones arranged in a careful pattern, these measurements could pinpoint the gun's location on a map. The training was intense. Harrison and other selected officers learned to read oscilloscopes, devices that displayed sound waves as glowing lines on small screens. They learned to account for weather conditions that affected sound speed. Temperature, humidity, wind direction, and even the terrain itself changed how sound traveled. Sound moves faster through warm air than cold air, explained one scientist. A calculation that is perfect on a summer day will be wrong in winter unless you adjust for temperature. The young officers practiced with chalk and paper, drawing geometric patterns and solving complex equations. They placed dummy microphones across the Oklahoma plains and calculated positions of artillery firing at known locations. Slowly, their accuracy improved, but equipment was temperamental. The sensitive microphones picked up every noise, passing trucks, airplane engines, even thunderstorms. The oscilloscopes broke down in heat and cold. The calculations, done by hand, took precious time. Many senior officers believed the whole project was a waste of resources. Real artillery work is done by observation and guts, not mathematics, one colonel grumbled. This science nonsense will get men killed. By 1943, the first sound-ranging units deployed to combat in North Africa. The results were disappointing. Desert heat destroyed equipment. Sand clogged the sensitive microphones. Enemy guns were often too far away or too mobile to track effectively. Several units were disbanded, but Harrison and others persisted. They learned from each failure. They improved the equipment. They developed faster calculation methods. They discovered that sound ranging worked best in the cold, still air of European winters. And most importantly, they learned to combine sound ranging with other technologies. In Italy during late 1943, Harrison's unit achieved their first major success. A German artillery battery had been shelling American positions for 3 days. No one could locate it through the mountainous terrain. Traditional observation failed. Harrison's team set up their microphone arrays across 5 miles of front. When the German guns fired again, the oscilloscopes captured clean recordings. Harrison's specialists worked quickly, plotting the time differences on their maps. Within 4 minutes, they had coordinates. American counter-battery fire was devastating. The German guns went silent immediately and permanently. When infantry later captured the position, they found 4 destroyed howitzers and dead crews. The Germans never knew what hit them. Word spread quietly through artillery circles. This sound ranging system actually worked. Requests for sound ranging units increased. More officers volunteered for training. By the time Allied forces invaded Normandy in June 1944, Harrison was commanding his own sound ranging battery. The Normandy hedgerows proved perfect for the technology. Dense vegetation hid German artillery from aerial observation. But sound could not be hidden. Every time a German gun fired, Harrison's microphones heard it. His team became incredibly efficient, locating and destroying enemy batteries with mechanical precision. The equipment improved constantly. Better microphones that could filter out background noise. More reliable oscilloscopes. Pre-calculated charts that speed up mathematics. And most revolutionary, the integration with another new technology, radar. Radar could detect the metal shell as it flew through the air. Combined with sound ranging that detected the muzzle blast, the two systems could confirm each other's readings. If sound ranging calculated a position and radar showed shells coming from the same location, the target was certain. By the Battle of the Bulge in December 1944, Harrison's unit had perfected their craft. They could locate a German battery within 2 minutes of it firing. Their accuracy was within 25 meters. Their hit rate on confirmed targets exceeded 85%. German artillery, once the pride of the Wehrmacht, was being systematically destroyed. Harrison sat in his tent one cold December night, reviewing another successful mission. His team had located and helped destroy 3 German batteries that day. The mathematics were beautiful, the geometry perfect. But Harrison could not escape the knowledge that his calculations killed real men. A young specialist interrupted his thoughts. "Sir, we are receiving reports from other units. German artillery activity has decreased by almost 40% in our sector over the past week. Harrison nodded. They are learning to fear firing their guns. Every time they shoot, we find them. Is that not good, sir? We are winning. Yes, Harrison said quietly. We are winning. But I wonder what the German gunners think. They fire a few rounds, then death falls from the sky. They cannot see us. They cannot fight back. It must be terrifying. The specialist looked uncomfortable. They are the enemy, sir. They are, Harrison agreed. But they are also men doing their duty, like us. This technology we have created, it changes warfare in ways I am not sure anyone has fully considered. Far away in the Belgian forests, Lieutenant Kruger was reaching similar conclusions. After days of observation and questioning survivors, he had begun to understand the truth. The Americans were not using magic or ghost spotters. They were using science. Kruger had sketched the tall poles he observed behind American lines. He had mapped their positions and noted their geometric arrangement. He had collected testimony from a dozen destroyed batteries about the timing of counter-battery fire. All the evidence pointed to one conclusion. The Americans could locate German guns by sound. The question now was what to do about it. Kruger knew that understanding the enemy's method was only half the battle. Finding a counter to it would be much harder. And time was running out for Germany. Lieutenant Hans Kruger stood before Colonel Ernst Richter, spreading hand-drawn sketches across the desk. Outside the farmhouse headquarters, the sounds of war rumbled in the distance. It was January 1945, and Germany was losing badly on all fronts. These structures appear repeatedly behind American lines, Kruger explained, pointing to his drawings of tall poles with equipment. They are positioned in precise geometric patterns, typically 6 or more installations covering a sector. The spacing is too deliberate to be random. Colonel Richter studied the sketches with tired eyes. He was a veteran of artillery warfare since 1939, but this new technological war confused him. You believe these detect our guns by sound? Yes, sir. I have questioned 23 survivors from destroyed batteries. The pattern is consistent. We fire, then within 2 to 4 minutes, accurate American counter-battery fire arrives. No observation planes, no ground spotters visible. The only explanation is they are tracking our muzzle blasts. Richter sat back heavily. If you are correct, Lieutenant, then we have no defense. Every time we fire, we announce our position. Perhaps not, sir. Kruger pulled out another document. I found this on a dead American soldier. It is a partial manual for something called sound ranging equipment. The technology is real. The colonel read the water-stained papers, his expression growing darker. The manual described microphone arrays, sound wave timing, geometric calculations. It confirmed Kruger's worst fears. The Americans had industrialized the location of enemy artillery. I am sending you to Army Group Headquarters, Richter said finally. Intelligence needs to see this immediately. 3 days later, Wehrmacht artillery commanders across the Western Front received urgent new protocols. The orders were clear. German artillery tactics must change immediately to counter American sound detection. First, gun crews were ordered to fire no more than 2 rounds before displacing to new positions. The old practice of sustained bombardment was suicide. Fire quickly, move faster. Second, batteries were instructed to vary their firing trajectories with each shot. The Americans calculated positions based on sound waves traveling in straight lines. By firing at different angles, Germans hoped to confuse the calculations. Third, some batteries began using recorded sounds of artillery fire played from false positions. Large speakers hidden in the forest would broadcast the sound of gunfire, hoping to trick American microphones into targeting empty woods. Fourth, German gunners were taught to listen for aircraft before firing. Even with sound detection, Americans still used spotter planes when possible. Firing only during poor weather or darkness might help avoid detection. The effects were immediate. American counter-battery success rates dropped from 85% to around 55%. German batteries became more elusive, firing brief bursts before vanishing into the landscape. Major Harrison noticed the change within days. His sound ranging team recorded fewer German artillery positions. When they did locate a battery and call in counterfire, the Germans were often already gone. They know, Harrison told his commanding officer, Colonel Matthews. The Germans have figured out our system. Can they defeat it? Matthews asked. No, but they can reduce its effectiveness. By firing minimally and moving constantly, they make themselves harder targets. Harrison pointed to his maps showing decreasing kill confirmations. We are still destroying German artillery, but not as efficiently. Then we adapt, Matthews said. What do you need? Integration with radar units and flash spotting teams, Harrison replied. If we combine 3 detection methods, the Germans cannot fool all of them simultaneously. Flash spotting was another technology borrowed from British experience. Specialized cameras photographed the brief flash when artillery fired. By triangulating photographs from multiple cameras, operators could calculate gun positions. Combined with sound ranging and radar tracking of shells in flight, the Americans created a redundant system. By February 1945, Harrison's sector employed all 3 technologies working together. When German guns fired, sound ranging detected the muzzle blast, radar tracked the shell's trajectory, and flash spotting cameras captured the muzzle flash. 3 independent calculations that usually pointed to the same location. The German countermeasures became less effective. Even if they confused one detection method, the other 2 still worked. Counter-battery accuracy climbed back above 70%. For Lieutenant Kruger, now promoted to captain and commanding his own reduced battery, the war had become a nightmare of mathematics. His single remaining howitzer fired exactly 2 rounds per day, always from different positions. His crew could break down, move, and set up the gun in under 20 minutes. They became experts at camouflage and deception, yet still the American shells found them. On February 14th, Kruger's battery fired 2 rounds at American infantry positions. His crew was already dismantling the gun when the counter-battery fire arrived. They had displaced 400 meters from their firing position, but American shells walked across both locations. Kruger lost his closest friend that day. Stefan, an artillery sergeant who had served with him since 1943, was killed by shrapnel while loading equipment onto a truck. He died quickly, but not instantly. Kruger held him during the final moments. How do they know, Hans? Stefan gasped. We followed every protocol. How? Kruger had no answer. Even understanding the American system did not mean he could defeat it. The technology was too good, too thorough. It was like fighting an enemy who could see in the dark while Germans stumbled blindly. After burying Stefan, Kruger made a decision. He volunteered for a desperate SS operation, a raid on an American sound ranging station. Wehrmacht intelligence had located an installation on Hill 402, relatively isolated and potentially vulnerable. The mission was dangerous, probably suicidal, but it offered something Kruger desperately wanted: understanding. If he could see the equipment up close, maybe he could find a weakness. Maybe Stefan's death would mean something. The briefing took place in a frozen barn. 30 men, a mix of SS commandos and Wehrmacht veterans, listened as the intelligence officer outlined the plan. The target is here, he said, marking a map. 1 sound ranging station with approximately 15 American personnel, mostly technical specialists, not combat infantry. Light security. We strike at night during the next heavy snowfall. What about reinforcements? Someone asked. Nearest American units are 20 minutes away. We will have 10 minutes on target, maximum. Grab what equipment we can carry, destroy the rest, withdraw. Kruger studied the map carefully. Hill 402 was exposed, but the approach through forest offered concealment. If they moved in complete silence through darkness, surprise was possible. But once the fighting started, they would have minutes to accomplish everything before American tanks arrived. Our primary objective, the SS commander continued, is to capture intact equipment and any personnel who understand the system. Secondary objective is destruction if capture is impossible. We need to understand this technology to defeat it. Kruger raised his hand. What if the Americans destroy their own equipment before we can capture it? The commander looked at him coldly. Then we will have learned nothing, and good men will have died for nothing. Do not let that happen. 3 nights later, the raid team assembled in freezing darkness. Snow fell heavily, muffling sound and reducing visibility to a few meters. Perfect conditions for a stealth approach. The men wore white winter camouflage and carried silenced weapons for the initial assault. Kruger checked his equipment one final time. Grenades, rifle, ammunition, and a leather bag for carrying documents or small equipment. He thought of Stefan and all the other men killed by this invisible American system. Tonight, one way or another, he would see it up close. He would understand how mathematics had become a weapon more deadly than bullets. And perhaps, if luck favored Germany for once, he might find a way to fight back. The SS commander gave the signal. 30 white shadows moved into the snowy forest, ghosts seeking to destroy other ghosts. The sound ranging station on Hill 402 looked peaceful under falling snow. Corporal Jimmy Chun stamped his feet against the cold, trying to keep circulation in his toes. Guard duty in the middle of the night was boring work, especially this far behind the lines. Inside the heated tent, 5 technical specialists played cards and drank coffee. They were scientists and mathematicians in uniform, not combat soldiers. Their war was fought with oscilloscopes and calculations, not rifles. The closest they had come to danger was when a stray German artillery shell landed half a mile away 3 weeks ago. Major Frank Harrison had arrived earlier that evening to review equipment performance. His sound-ranging battery had destroyed 42 German artillery positions in the past month, and Division Command wanted a detailed report. Harrison sat at the plotting table, writing notes by lamplight. "Straight again," said Specialist Davis, laying down his cards. "I think you are cheating, Johnson." The men laughed. Outside, Corporal Chun checked his watch. 0330 hours. 3.5 hours until dawn and the end of his shift. He wondered if the mess tent would have hot breakfast ready when he got off duty. In the forest 200 meters away, 30 German soldiers lay motionless in the snow. They had crawled the last 100 meters on their bellies, moving with agonizing slowness. Now they waited for the attack signal, barely breathing, weapons ready. Captain Kruger studied the American position through binoculars. The tall microphone poles stood like dark fingers against the gray sky. The command tent glowed faintly from interior lights. One guard walked a regular patrol pattern. Too regular. The Americans felt safe here. The SS commander raised his hand, counting down silently. 3, 2, 1. Grenades arced through the falling snow. The first explosions shattered the winter silence. Corporal Chin spun around, reaching for his rifle, but machine gun fire cut him down before he could raise it. The Americans inside the tent heard the blasts and shouting, but seconds of confusion cost them dearly. German commandos poured from the forest, white shapes moving with deadly purpose. They knew exactly where to go. Guard positions were hit first, eliminating resistance. Then the assault teams converged on the command tent and equipment stations. Major Harrison grabbed his rifle and kicked over the plotting table, creating improvised cover. Everyone armed. Return fire. Around him, the technical specialists fumbled for weapons they rarely used. They were mathematicians, not infantrymen, but fear and training took over. Specialist Davis fired his rifle through the tent wall at shadowy figures outside. German bullets answered, ripping through canvas. Davis fell backward, clutching his arm. Johnson dragged him behind equipment crates. "We need to destroy the sensitive material." Harrison shouted. "They cannot capture this equipment." German grenades exploded near the tent, shredding one wall. Through the smoke and falling snow, Kruger saw Americans fighting back harder than expected. These technical soldiers were braver than intelligence predicted, but numbers and surprise favored the Germans. "Push forward," the SS commander screamed. "Get inside that tent." Harrison made a split-second decision. His men could hold for maybe 2 minutes before being overrun. American reinforcements would take 20 minutes to arrive. That left 18 minutes for the Germans to study or steal the sound-ranging equipment. Unless he denied them that time. "Cover me," Harrison ordered. He ran to the oscilloscopes and began smashing them with his rifle butt. Glass shattered. Delicate electronics sparked and died. He grabbed calculation charts and shoved them into a small fire burning in a portable stove. "Sir, what are you doing?" Johnson yelled. "Making this raid worthless." Harrison grabbed more documents, feeding them to flames. He yanked cables from recording equipment, ruining connections that took days to calibrate properly. Kruger reached the tent entrance just in time to see Harrison destroying the equipment. For a moment, their eyes met across smoke and chaos. Harrison was older, maybe mid-30s, with a thin face and intellectual eyes. Not a combat soldier, but his hands moved with determined purpose, ruining everything Kruger came to capture. "Stop him," Kruger shouted, But American covering fire drove the Germans back momentarily. Harrison kicked over a filing cabinet, scattering papers. He smashed the face of the main oscilloscope, the most important piece of equipment. Specialist Johnson joined him, both men destroying their own station rather than let it fall into enemy hands. That a German stick grenade landed inside the tent. Harrison saw it, grabbed it, and threw it back outside in one fluid motion. The explosion killed 2 German commandos. But more kept coming. "Fall back," Harrison ordered. His small group retreated through the back of the tent into the darkness, still firing. They left behind destroyed equipment and burning documents. Kruger finally entered the tent. Smoke and snow swirled through torn canvas. Smashed glass crunched under his boots. The oscilloscopes were destroyed, faces beaten in, electronics scattered. Papers still burned in the small stove. Everything important had been deliberately ruined. No, Kruger grabbed at burning papers, but they crumbled to ash in his hands. He looked around desperately. There had to be something salvageable, something that would make this raid meaningful. The SS commander appeared, blood on his white camouflage. "We have casualties. American armor is 10 minutes out. We leave now. But the equipment is destroyed. Grab anything portable and move." Kruger's men collected fragments, a small oscilloscope component, some partially burned calculation charts, broken microphone pieces. But the Americans had destroyed the most important elements. The mission was a failure. Outside, 5 Americans lay dead, including Corporal Chin. 8 more were wounded. The German commandos had lost 12 men, including half the SS assault team. All that death for fragments and ruins to as the Germans melted back into the forest, American tanks arrived with infantry support. They found Major Harrison and survivors among the destroyed microphone poles, administering first aid to the wounded. "Did they get anything?" Colonel Matthews asked urgently when he arrived minutes later. "Fragments only," Harrison replied, exhausted. "We destroyed everything critical. The calibration data, the calculation methods, the operational procedures. They might understand the principle, but they cannot replicate the system from what they took." Matthews looked at the dead Americans being covered with blankets. 5 killed, 8 wounded, to protect mathematics and electronics. To protect a war-winning technology, Harrison corrected quietly. If the Germans captured intact equipment and documentation, they might develop countermeasures that work. Or worse, build their own system. He paused. "Those men died protecting information, sir. That makes their sacrifice no less meaningful." In the forest, Kruger stumbled through snow with his surviving teammates. His leather bag contained pieces of equipment he barely understood and documents too damaged to read completely. He had killed American soldiers tonight and watched German comrades die, all for broken fragments. But as he examined one partially intact calculation chart by flashlight, understanding began to dawn. The mathematics were there, incomplete but visible. Geometric patterns, time calculations. The principle was clear now. Even if the implementation remained mysterious, he finally had proof of how the Americans were winning the artillery war. The question was whether this knowledge mattered anymore. Germany was collapsing. The Eastern Front was a disaster. The Western Front was retreating steadily. Even perfect understanding of American sound ranging could not change the inevitable outcome. Still, knowledge had value. Understanding how you were beaten was better than dying in confusion. Kruger would make his report. Perhaps future generations would learn from Germany's technological defeat. 3 weeks later, both the Americans and Germans had recovered from the raid. Harrison's sound ranging station was rebuilt with new equipment. The microphones stood tall again, listening for enemy guns. The Germans had analyzed their captured fragments and confirmed what Kruger suspected. The American system was brilliant, simple, and nearly impossible to defeat with current German resources. The invisible war continued, but now both sides understood they were fighting with mathematics and physics, not just courage and steel. It was a new kind of warfare, and America had mastered it first. February and March 1945 brought the final collapse of German resistance in the West. American and British forces crossed the Rhine River, the last major barrier protecting Germany itself. From the east, Soviet armies advanced like an unstoppable tide. The Wehrmacht was not just losing, it was disintegrating. Captain Hans Kruger commanded a single artillery piece now, all that remained of his once proud battery. His crew had been reduced to 6 men, exhausted and hungry, moving constantly to avoid counter-battery fire. They fired perhaps twice per day, always at night, always from different positions. It was pointless, but orders were orders. "We have 3 shells left," reported his gunner, a teenager named Otto who lied about his age to join the army. Now 17, Otto looked 40 from stress and privation. Kruger nodded tiredly. 3 shells for a gun that once fired hundreds per day. The mathematics of defeat were clear. Germany had lost the artillery war completely. American counter-battery fire had destroyed an estimated 60% of German artillery pieces on the Western Front. The survivors, like Kruger's lone howitzer, were more symbolic than effective. The Americans had won through technology and industrial power. For every gun Germany lost, America produced 5 more. For every skilled German crew killed, America trained 10 replacements. And most crushing of all, American artillery could fire with impunity while German guns announced their own death warrant with each shot. Across the front lines, Major Frank Harrison reviewed statistics that told the story of technological superiority. His sound-ranging battery had helped locate and destroy 287 German artillery positions since D-Day. The accuracy rate was 73%, accounting for German countermeasures and movement. Combined with flash spotting and radar, American forces achieved artillery dominance that military historians would study for decades, but numbers on paper did not show the human cost. Harrison knew his calculations had killed thousands of men. Young soldiers like those he saw when examining captured positions. Farm boys and factory workers, conscripted into a losing war, destroyed by mathematics they never understood. "Sir, we just received word," reported Lieutenant Williams, Harrison's executive officer. "Germany has surrendered. The war in Europe is over." May 8, 1945. Victory in Europe Day. Harrison sat down slowly, processing the information. After years of fighting, the war had simply ended. No more coordinates to calculate. No more enemy batteries to locate. No more men dying because of his mathematics. "We won," Williams said, smiling. "Yes," Harrison replied. "We won." But the smile would not come. For Kruger, surrender came as relief mixed with shame. His battery had fired its last 3 shells on May 5th. 2 days later, American tanks appeared on the road, and fighting was clearly pointless. Kruger ordered his men to destroy their gun and surrender. The American soldiers who captured them were young, well-fed, and professionally courteous. They searched the prisoners, but found nothing threatening. Kruger was sent to a processing camp where thousands of Wehrmacht soldiers waited for repatriation or reassignment. It was there. In June 1945, that fate intervened. American technical assessment teams were examining captured German positions and interviewing prisoners with specialized knowledge. Kruger, who spoke decent English and had documented his observations about sound ranging, was selected as a translator and technical consultant. The meeting happened by pure chance. Harrison was part of a team examining German artillery positions near the former front lines. Kruger was assigned to translate and provide context about German tactics. They recognized each other immediately. "The raid on Hill 402, Harrison said. "February. You were there." "Yes," Kruger replied. "As were you. You destroyed the equipment." They stood in awkward silence, 2 men who had tried to kill each other months ago, now simply soldiers without a war. Harrison gestured to a bombed-out building where they could talk privately. For an hour, they discussed the invisible war they had fought. "Did you ever determine how we located your batteries?" Harrison asked. "Sound ranging," Kruger said. "Microphones placed in geometric patterns, recording exact timing of muzzle blasts. Mathematical triangulation. Simple physics applied with devastating effect. Simple in principle, complex in execution. Would it have mattered?" Kruger asked. "If we had understood earlier?" Harrison considered carefully. "No. Understanding does not mean ability to counter. You would need equivalent technology and industrial capacity. Germany had neither. We were fighting 20th century warfare with 19th century methods," Kruger said quietly. "I realized that too late. It was not just sound ranging," Harrison admitted. "We combined it with radar, flash spotting, aerial observation, and signals intelligence. Redundant systems. Even when you countered one method, others still worked. Kruger nodded. I lost most of my battery to your calculations. Good men who died without ever seeing the enemy that killed them. I am sorry, Harrison said, and meant it. You were doing your duty. As was I. The technology you employed was brilliant. Terrible, but brilliant. They parted shortly after, never to meet again. But both men carried that conversation for the rest of their lives. In 1963, military historians interviewed Harrison for a book about artillery in World War II. Now a retired colonel teaching at a university, Harrison spoke candidly about sound ranging. We revolutionized warfare, he said. For the first time, artillery could be located and destroyed without visual observation. The Germans called it ghost spotting or American magic. But it was just mathematics and physics applied systematically. How do you feel about your role? The historian asked. Harrison was quiet for a long moment. Proud of the technical achievement, troubled by the human cost. My calculations killed thousands of men I never saw. Young soldiers doing their duty. The mathematics were elegant. The reality was bloody. Do you have regrets? I have memories. Whether they are regrets, I honestly cannot say. We were at war. I used my skills to help win that war. The alternative was letting those German guns kill American and British soldiers. I made my choice. In 1979, a German military magazine interviewed Kruger, now a retired engineer living in Stuttgart. He spoke about his experience fighting against American technology. We were brave, Kruger said. We were well trained. We followed doctrine. None of it mattered against American industrial might and technological superiority. They fought with science while we fought with courage. Science won. Was there a moment you knew Germany would lose? When I understood what the Americans were doing with sound ranging. They had turned artillery from an art into a science. Every time we fired, we announced our position to an invisible enemy. It was like fighting in bright daylight while your opponent has perfect night vision. The outcome was never in doubt. Modern military forces still use descendants of Harrison's sound ranging technology. Today's systems employ satellite positioning, computer processing, and instant data analysis. A gun firing anywhere on the battlefield can be located within seconds and engaged within a minute. The principle remains the same. Sound waves travel at known speeds. Mathematics reveals their source. Destruction follows. The ghost spotters that haunted German artillery in 1944 were not supernatural. They were scientists and mathematicians who understood that physics could be weaponized as effectively as explosives. They proved that wars could be won in laboratories and universities before a single shot was fired in anger. Harrison died in 1998, taking with him memories of a war fought with oscilloscopes and equations. Kruger passed away in 2003, having lived long enough to see modern warfare become even more technological and impersonal than what he experienced. But their story of invisible warfare and mathematical death remains relevant. Modern soldiers engage enemies they never see, using GPS coordinates and computer targeting. Drones strike from beyond visual range. Cyber warfare attacks infrastructure without physical presence. The Battle of the Bulge featured tanks, infantry, and traditional combat. But its outcome was influenced heavily by technologies most soldiers never understood. German troops could not comprehend how American artillery always knew their positions. The answer was mathematics, physics, and American ingenuity. They called it ghost spotting. History calls it technological superiority. Either way, it changed warfare forever. The invisible war that Harrison and Kruger fought lives on in every precision strike, every sensor network, every mathematical algorithm that turns coordinates into consequences. War may still require courage and sacrifice, but increasingly, it is won by those who master technology and science. The ghosts are real, and they are listening.